Key Story, Part 4, Risk and Reward, by Lauren Wright. Laughter followed Key as he trudged out of the tavern. The bartender had taken one look at his beardless face and unranked form, refusing to acknowledge Key's attempts at gathering information. When Key had tried to demand acknowledgement and attention, he had slipped on the freshly mopped floor, fallen flat on his back, and knocked a chair over on top of himself. Apparently, such comedy had saved him from being tossed from the tavern, but Key wasn't sure the laughter at his plight was much better. This was the fourth such response he'd gotten today. Not a single barkeep or tavern owner had paid an iota of attention to his plight. Key knew that he was too young and too low a rank to frequent such establishments. The owners and managers were only protecting their own livelihoods. The guard tended to crack down pretty heavily on mischief in the nicer neighborhoods, and serving underranked patrons definitely qualified. Key knew, too, that he was unlikely to gather any information on Lynn outside of the Bad Rock, but, well, Milo would have his head if he knew that Key had been off of the safer streets. Just as he began walking down the street towards another tavern, his thoughts were interrupted by a sudden commotion. A trio of rough-looking men stumbled out of a nearby alley, bickering loudly. One of them seemed familiar. Key stepped forward, his heart beginning to race. He recognized that one. He'd seen him in Lynn's crew. Grouchy or not, inebriated or not, he was his only lead at finding out exactly what had happened to his brother. Key hurried after them, his earlier concerns momentarily forgotten. As he followed, he kept a cautious distance, trying to remain unnoticed. The men continued their heated argument, oblivious to his presence. Key's mind raced with questions. Had Lynn gotten involved with something dangerous? Were these men friends or foes? He trailed them through the winding streets, his anxiety growing with each step. The rough trio finally stopped at a secluded corner of the Shale, their voices dropping to hushed tones. Key strained to hear their conversation, but the distance and the noise of the road made it difficult. Just as he was about to edge closer, a hand clamped down on his shoulder. Key froze, his heart leaping into his throat. He turned his head slowly, expecting the worst. Instead, he found himself face to face with an older woman, her eyes sharp and knowing. "You look lost, boy," she said, her voice firm. "This isn't a place for someone like you." Key's eyes darted back to the trio, now moving further away, heading deeper into the Shale. Panic surged within him. He couldn't afford to lose them. He gestured urgently, trying to convey his need to follow. The woman narrowed her eyes and seemed to understand. "You walk a dangerous road if you follow them," she said. She released his shoulder and stepped back, allowing him to continue. Key nodded his thanks and hurried after the men, his heart pounding. As he caught sight of them again, his mind raced with new resolve. Lynn was out there somewhere, and Key wouldn't rest until he found him. Key took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease. The Shale was a risky place, but it was also the only lead he had. His resolve hardened. He had to find Lynn, no matter the cost. The dangers of the Shale and Milo's wrath were small price to pay for the chance to uncover the truth. Key's thoughts whirled as he made his way down unfamiliar roads. They say more criminals die crushed in Bad Rock than the guard ever catch. The Downslope District, though most just called it the Shale, held the worst spots of Bad Rock still within Craghold. None of the lowest districts were particularly safe, but the Shale was far and away the most dangerous of the lot. Key walked cautiously along dimly lit paths of unpaved, barely worked stone, paying no mind to the few individuals who passed around him. The air was thick with the scent of wet rock and metal, and twice Key had to carefully circle a portion of the path slick with algae. The second instance led Key to a place where the passageway narrowed, and the rock walls seemed to close in on him. His steps slowed, and his unease grew. Then it began. A low, rumbling groan that seemed to emanate from the earth beneath him. A few soft pops shot through the air. Key froze in his steps, scanning his surroundings in alarm. The stone beneath his feet felt unsteady, like a giant beast beneath the surface, stirring from slumber. All the rumors and warnings he had heard flashed through his mind, how the bad rock could give way without warning, swallowing whole buildings in mere moments. Just as panic began to claw through him, a cloaked figure came rushing around the corner. "Don't just stand there, you idiot! Move!" Without thinking, Key tried to step back, but the very ground beneath him shifted. A sharp crack split the air as the rock trembled. He lost his balance, stumbling and falling as the ground gave way beneath him. He scooted himself on hands and feet, scurrying as fast as he could away from the breaking rock. Desperation seized him as he struggled away from the center of the collapse. The breakage seemed to follow him, the ground giving way under his hands and feet. The chaos of the bad rock was unrelenting, and it seemed determined to claim him. Suddenly, a pair of strong hands grabbed his left arm, turning him and hauling him up to his feet. "Step only where I step, as soft and quick as you can," the cloaked figure hissed into his face before turning and lightly darting away. Key let his thoughts quiet and allowed his body to simply move. The first few steps he took, Key felt the ground continuing to shift and give way under his feet. He froze for a brief moment and nearly fell again. His distress caught the attention of his mysterious benefactor, who darted a step or two back as they called to him. "The rock doesn't have to be stable enough to make it out. Don't stop moving." Key took their words to heart and moved, keeping his steps as quick and as light as he could, and trying to land his feet in the exact footsteps of his rescuer. They led him far past where Key would have thought it safe to stop before slowing their steps. "You are exceptionally lucky that Lynn asked me to keep an eye out for you." The cloaked figure scolded and slid their hood back, revealing a scarred face wearing a distinctly disgruntled scowl. "Freezing in the bad rock, you don't even have the sense of a humble gopher to get yourself out of danger." They began stomping away, then called back over their shoulder. "Well, are you coming or not?" Key jumped, then hurried after them. They knew Lynn, and, grumpy or not, they were his best chance at finding out exactly what had happened to his brother.